Thank you, and that concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions for backbench members, and question 1 is from Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, following the convictions for the murders of John McNabb and Caden Moy, who was killed on Irvine Beach in my constituency last summer, the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit said that knife possession increased by 15% amongst 11 to 15-year-olds between 2020 and 2025. What further measures will the Scottish Government take to tackle the rise in knife crime and divert young people away from gang membership?
First Minister.
First of all, can I express my condolences to the family of Caden Moy on his tragic loss and on the suffering that they have endured. I very much understand the concerns that Patricia Gibson has brought to Parliament today. The Government takes a range of different measures to address the issue of knife crime, not least of which is the support that we make available to education programmes in our schools and in the wider community under the theme of No Knives, Better Lives, and a whole range of other actions which, of course, can lead also to imprisonment for individuals who are convicted of knife crime offences. And the Government will always review the steps that are in place to ensure that we have adequate measures in place. Prior to the election, I convened, along with the former Justice Secretary, discussions around the issues in relation to knife crime with a variety of different stakeholders. I was confident from those discussions that we had a range of appropriate measures in place, but we must constantly keep them under review. And the comments that the current Justice Secretary made at the weekend about looking at the question of examining an amnesty around possession of knives is an issue that to which the Government will give active consideration.
Emma Roddick.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Does the First Minister share my concern about the planned withdrawal of Loganair services between Inverness and the Northern Isles and the potential impact that this could have on jobs in Inverness and Nairn, both those connected to Dalcross and Highlands and Islands Airports Limited, but also those skilled workers that we need to be able to travel to the Inner Murray Firth to support our growing energy sector?
First Minister.
I understand the concerns that Emma Roddick brings. This issue was raised with me last week, and I indicated then that I expected there to be discussions between Highlands and Islands Airports Limited and Loganair to find a collaborative solution on these issues. I'm encouraged that discussions have taken place between the parties, and that is the best way to resolve these commercial issues. Ministers will be kept appraised of progress, and it is important that we support developments in and around Inverness Airport to ensure the sustainability of employment to which Emma Roddick referred, and the Cabinet Secretary for Transport is meeting regularly with colleagues across the Chamber on this issue.
Carol Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week is Carers Week, and this year's report found that almost half of people caring in Scotland do not feel that their communities are carer-friendly. This carer-friendly communities was first highlighted in 2015 in a carers report. Does the First Minister recognise more needs to be done to support unpaid carers in their communities? Can he identify any businesses, organisations or government bodies working on this? And what barriers would he identify in government delivering on this?
First Minister.
First of all, let me record my appreciation to carers during Carers Week for the essential support that they provide within our communities. We quite literally could not provide the support to individuals that is provided by carers without the love, care and attention of carers within our community. Carers Week encourages us all to encourage the contribution that carers make, and I do so happily today. The Government is investing over £88 million in local carer support through Local Authority Carers Act funding, and that's designed to be distributed at local level to meet the varying circumstances that will exist in different parts of the country. We are also continuing to provide £600,000 of support in the current financial year for local carer centres, invaluable support to carers, and that's in addition to the local authority and IGB funding. So through those different channels, whether it's the direct funding to local authorities or the direct funding to carer centres, the Government is trying to create the capacity at local level to support the delivery of assistance to carers within our communities.
Thomas Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the First Minister outline what assessment, if any, the Scottish Government has made of the cost of providing taxpayer-funded legal aid to asylum seekers and refugees in Scotland? And does he consider it fair that taxpayers are funding legal representation for strangers accused of crimes, while many Scots struggle to access legal services themselves?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the decisions on legal aid are taken independently by the Scottish Legal Aid Board to the high standards of scrutiny, and also cognizant of the responsibilities that we carry, which are underpinned in the Scotland Act to be compliant with the Human Rights Act and the provisions of the European Convention on Human Rights. Because fundamentally, the issue that Mr Kerr seeks to erode is the rights of individuals in our society. And I just have to make it clear to Parliament, I have absolutely no intention of eroding the human rights of individuals, because that's the foundation of a civilised society.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Yesterday, the North East received the devastating news that the new Baird and Anchor hospitals for maternity care and cancer care, respectively, are to be delayed yet again. So they'll now be 7 years overdue and at least £300 million over budget. After this government's catastrophic mishandling at QEUH and the Edinburgh Sick Kids, will the First Minister now personally step in and channel the full weight of this government to address this disastrous situation and get these hospitals open?
First Minister.
I understand the concern that Mr Kerr brings to Parliament, and I share that concern because I'm deeply aware of the delays to these projects, and it's an issue that has been personally explored and examined by me. So let me give Mr Kerr the assurance that this issue is no stranger to my desk. It's an issue about which I am profoundly disturbed. Now, Mr Kerr made the comment about the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital and the Children's Hospital in Edinburgh. Now, I would contend that the delay to the opening of the Children's Hospital in Edinburgh was a direct result of the government's response to the early concerns that were raised about the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. So I don't think those two issues are directly comparable. The implications of the construction issues around the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital, the essential scrutiny that's required about all these issues, is part of what is having the issues in the Baird and Anchor Hospital, because the questions that have been answered or been addressed are about the infection control and the safety arrangements that must be in place. And I know that Mr Kerr will understand the perspective I'm putting here, that these are the substantive issues that are at stake. However, that is resulting in an extraordinary increase in cost, which I find totally unacceptable. Ministers are actively engaged in this issue. I have briefing about this because the issues have been explored by NHS Assurance that was set up to address the implications of the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. But I aired to Parliament the concern I have that the management of all of these questions to ensure we have patient safety as a paramount consideration in our hospitals is resulting in the presentation of extreme difficulties in the delivery of capital investment projects in the health service. And the government must address that issue and resolve it so that we can continue our investment programme in health. So I assure Mr Kerr there's no lack of attention to this particular question. Indeed, it is troubling me enormously, and I'm determined to ensure that we get to a better place as a consequence. If it would help, I'd be happy to meet with Mr Kerr to discuss this issue with the Health Secretary.
Jenny Minto.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Learning Estate Investment Programme, or LEAP, has improved the school estate and learning journey for young people across Scotland. As the First Minister knows, Argyll and Bute has had an application to LEAP for a joint campus in Mull approved. However, would the First Minister commit to a review of the criteria and funding structures to ensure they reflect the needs of education and the wider community in islands like Mull?
Minister.
President, I'm familiar with the issues that Jenny Minto raises, and I discussed them during the election campaign with campaigners when I visited her constituency in Oban. I understand the issues that are at stake here, and in relation to the question of, I'm On the general question of LEAP funding, I think the criteria are robust and they provide the appropriate governance. I do accept in island situations such as Mull, there may be a requirement for greater flexibility. So I'm prepared to have that issue examined for an island community situation in relation to Mull, and I hope that helps. I know there are some controversies around locations of school, but if it would help to Argyll and Bute Council to have some flexibility to resolve these issues, I'm happy to confirm that in Parliament today.
Duncan Dunlop.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week, First Minister, the NSPCC have warned there is a baby's blind spot in the care system. This warning followed recent University of Stirling research showing that children in Scotland wait on average more than 2 years just to get a decision on where they should permanently live. This is 4 times longer than is in England. The reality of this wait is that babies and young children are left without the stability of a permanent home, and those children are then likely to struggle to attach, as well as give and receive love in later life. I know that the Scottish Government is committed to review the effect which delays to permanence have on children, but we don't need another review to tell us what we already know. The promise was based on a 3-year all-encompassing care review. We need to take action.
Can I have a question, please?
So can I ask the First Minister, what action will this Government take now to help those mothers and babies in need?
First Minister.
This is an essential part of the work to implement the promise. And as Mr Dunlop will know, because he is very, very familiar with all of this work, there is an intense focus on trying to support families, and it's reflected also in the Government's commitment around whole family support to ensure that families in difficulty are supported. They're supported to stay together where it is safe and sustainable to do so, and to have the appropriate arrangements in place to care for and to support babies and children. So that is part of the commitment that we take forward. I had a meeting with the Education Secretary, with the leaders of the Promise, with the Independent Advisor Fiona Duncan and the Chief Executive of the Promise, Fraser McKinlay, just last week, and I can assure Mr Dunlop of the very focused approach by the Government to implementing the terms of the Promise to improve outcomes for babies and children in our country.
Kayleigh Kinross O'Neill.
Thank you. At a time when women's healthcare in Scotland faces sustained challenges, we are concerned about external forces undermining progress. Can the Government please confirm that they are committed to expanding abortion care, tackling gendered health inequalities and planned maternity service reform?
First Minister.
President Officer, there will be a statement on maternity arrangements in Parliament tomorrow from the on Thursday from the Health Secretary, and which addresses one of the points that has been made in relation to the availability of abortion services and women's health services. I confirm the Government's commitment to ensuring that we continue to develop and enhance the services and support that are available to women. It is an essential part of the priorities of the health ministers in the Scottish Government, and I assure Ms Kinross O'Neill about the steps that we're taking to do so.
Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, one of the cruellest austerity measures introduced was the bedroom tax, continued by the Labour Government. This is mitigated through the discretionary housing payment by the Scottish Government. However, I frequently come across constituents in community surgeries who are facing crisis and rent arrears who have not had this assessed and are eligible for it. Can I ask that the First Minister work with local government colleagues to ensure that this can be applied when people are originally applying for housing benefit, to ensure that my constituents are getting the help that they need?
First Minister.
I obviously want to make sure that wherever individuals are facing financial hardship and there is legitimate scope and intervention for the Scottish Government to intervene, that support is available. Part of that will involve local authorities making sure that individuals, when they are engaging with them, are properly advised about their rights and their entitlements. And of course, the Government makes available a record £115 million this year in discretionary housing payments to support individuals, and we obviously will work closely with local authorities to make sure that that financial support gets to those who require it within our society.
Keith Brown.
On his visit to Colesnaughton in my constituency, the First Minister spoke to residents regarding the anxiety, uncertainty and disruption impacting families evacuated following ground movement beneath their homes, and yet there is still no resolution in sight. While any support provided through the Belwyn scheme would be welcome, the scale, shock and duration of this incident is placing exceptional pressure on one of Scotland's smallest local authorities. Can the First Minister say what additional resources the Scottish Government will provide to ensure residents continue to receive essential support and Clackmannshire Council is not left bearing the costs of this unprecedented emergency alone?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, I am grateful to Mr Brown for raising this issue and also for accompanying me on my visit along with the Justice Secretary who leads on resilience matters to Colesnaughton on Friday. We saw it first hand in our discussions with Clackmannshire Council the enormous burden that is being addressed by the Council in trying to support the residents who have been affected by this evacuation, and then also in a discussion with families who have been affected, the scale of the disruption in turning their lives upside down as a consequence of this incident. Now, I'm acutely conscious from my discussions that Clackmannshire Council is dealing with an exceptional and unforeseen event. So, at my request, the Deputy First Minister has approved the allocation of financial support of £1 million to Clackmannshire Council in advance of any Belwyn formula applications to make sure that the Council is equipped financially to provide the support to individuals that is required in the short term, because there are very significant costs that are being carried by a very small local authority in Scotland. So I hope that initial allocation of £1 million will help to support the local authority in its moment of need. And I assure Mr Brown, as I assure the occupants who have been affected by this circumstance, of the sustained engagement of the Government with Clackmannshire Council and also with the Mining Remediation Authority in the carrying out of this investigation, which is a very detailed investigation that is required to provide assurance about what has happened in this concerning incident.
Now, before I take the next questioner, who will be Stephen Kerr, I want to remind him that this criminal case remains active and the sub judice rule is engaged, so please refrain from commenting on sentencing which is still to take place or sharing any information likely to identify victims who have not chosen to put their identity in the public domain. Mr Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Well, Danielle MacDonald has shown immense courage in waiving her anonymity and speaking publicly about her experiences so that others might not have to endure the same ordeal. Her case has prompted widespread concern and raised serious questions about how victims are heard, supported and protected when they come forward seeking help. Will the First Minister meet Danielle MacDonald to hear her concerns directly? And what action will the First Minister take to restore confidence that victims who ask for help will be listened to and protected?
First Minister.
I'd be very happy to meet with Danielle MacDonald and to hear the points that she would wish to raise with me. Mr Kerr will be aware that in the last parliamentary session, quite close to the election, we passed the new legislation on victims and witnesses support. That legislation puts victims central to the criminal justice process and the protection and preservation of their interests right at the heart of the criminal justice process. I would also say that having taken extensive evidence about that bill when I was sitting on the Criminal Justice Committee, I was also very impressed by the steps taken by the Lord Advocate Dorothy Bain to strengthen the protection and support and assistance to victims to ensure that they could properly and effectively present their evidence to courts in criminal proceedings. So I do think steps have been taken to enhance the role and the experience and the support available to victims, but I would be very happy to listen to Danielle MacDonald about what further steps would assist in ensuring that that policy objective, which I'm sure Mr Kerr and I share, is one that's able to be taken forward in a meaningful way for individuals.
Jenny Young.
Last weekend, I was contacted by my constituent Cecile about the interminable wait her son has faced to receive support for autism and ADHD. His emotions have become increasingly dysregulated, and the family have been forced to pay for private assessment and medication as they await any support at all from CAMHS. Cecile told me, and this is a direct quote, "This is what waiting for support can look like. It is not just a name on a waiting list. It is a child becoming more distressed and families pushed to their limits before meaningful help is available." So does the First Minister accept that, despite the best efforts of staff, CAMHS services are in a dire state, and will he look into this particular case to accelerate this boy's path to treatment?
First Minister.
Well, on the question of CAMHS waiting times, the national performance against the 18-week CAMHS standard has been sustained, with 91% of children and young people starting treatment within 18 weeks of referral. And I think some of the issues that Jenny Young has raised are broader issues about access to the appropriate levels of service and engagement at the earliest possible opportunity with families. And on this question, I want to make sure that we are able to offer much earlier intervention at a much lower level of intensity before individuals are judged to require CAMHS intervention, to provide support to families where children are presenting with dysregulated behaviour. Now, some of the models that the Government is looking at, I think I shared with Parliament last week that I had visited last week the services available from SAMH, the Nook in Glasgow, which is a walk-in facility which provides immediate assistance to individuals. Now, I'm not trying to suggest that's the answer to the point that Jenny Young is making, but what I am saying is that that model of early intervention, of ease of access, is what we need to do to make sure that children and young people are receiving the support that they can receive at the earliest possible opportunity. And the focus of our population health framework of early intervention supports that policy objective, and we'll be working to roll that out during this parliamentary term.
Stephen Bonner.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Given that this Parliament is responsible for many of the services that support children and families, including education, family law and devolved social security, and in light of such cases as faced by my constituent, where lengthy child maintenance disputes have had a significant impact on families despite tribunals ruling in the family's favour, does the First Minister agree that there is a strong case for considering whether responsibility for child maintenance should also sit here in Scotland alongside the wider services that already support children and families?
First Minister.
I think there's a strong argument for the point that Mr Bonner puts to me, because we do have extensive responsibilities around the care and support for children, and I want to make sure that that support can be as comprehensive as possible. So the points that Mr Bonner puts forward, I think, are worthy of further consideration to make sure that there's an integrated approach to supporting children and families within Scotland.
Kate Evans.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Striking staff at the University of Edinburgh are having their entire wages removed for participating in a marking and assessment boycott, despite this being just one part of their jobs. And remaining staff who are already overworked have been told to cover for their striking colleagues or go without pay. Does the First Minister agree with me that this is an unacceptable attempt to undermine solidarity between academic staff, and that management must respect the rights of its staff to withdraw their labour?
First Minister.
I think it's really important in such circumstances that there is good dialogue and engagement between the leadership of organisations and their workforce. I would encourage there to be that dialogue to try to resolve these issues, to enable the employees to be able to participate fully in their employment, and for the needs of students and other academic interests to be met. But fundamentally, it's a matter for dialogue between the leadership of the university and the staff and trade unions, and I would encourage that to take place.
Jack Middleton.
Job losses have recently been announced at Aberdeen-based energy firm Enermec. Sadly, there's stories every single week of oil and gas redundancies in the north-east of Scotland, but Labour won't scrap the energy profits levy that's costing 1,000 jobs a month, and Westminster won't allow the people of Scotland to control their own energy. So with the powers available to him, what will the First Minister do to support Aberdonians who are bearing the brunt of senseless Westminster energy policy?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, there are a number of powers over energy policy, which in fact a whole range of powers over energy policy that are reserved to the United Kingdom Government. And I've made it very clear to the Prime Minister the importance I attach to the removal of the Energy Profits Levy, which is sucking the economic life out of one of Scotland's most dynamic and important industries. And given some of the issues that we are facing in relation to energy supply and security of supply, I think the steps that are not being taken by the UK Government are causing exactly the damage that Mr Middleton puts to me. What I can assure Mr Middleton about is that the Scottish Government will do everything we can to ensure that the North East economy is supported with the investment that is made by the Scottish Government, which is supporting the reskilling and the new opportunities of individuals in the North East of Scotland, and we will continue to press the UK Government to remove the Energy Profits Levy at the earliest possible opportunity.
Julie McDougall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I recently met with the Chief Executive for Forth Valley College, and it was incredibly harrowing to hear about how apprenticeship courses are being cut, with the survival of the Alloa campus being put into jeopardy yet again. Inadequate real terms funding was one of the main reasons cited for Forth Valley College's recent hardships. The broken funding system itself also plays a role in disincentivising employers and in colleges creating new modern apprenticeships. On top of committing to sustainable multi-year funding as recommended by the Colleges Scotland 2026 manifesto, can the First Minister confirm whether the Scottish Government plans to review and overhaul the public funding model for Scotland's colleges, which is so clearly unfit for purpose?
First Minister.
So the Government has provided additional financial support to the college sector in its most recent budget, and we've also put in place new resources for the Alloa campus to ensure that Forth Valley College is able to sustain its operations in an area of high economic challenge. So the Government is taking steps to ensure the sustainability of the college sector. I do point out, however, to Julie McDougall that it's not really very coherent to come here and ask for more money for the college sector and then have her leader question me, as he did last week, about £2 billion of cuts in public spending. Now, it just doesn't work that way. You cannot come here, members cannot come here and ask for more money for investment in public services and then call for tax cuts to reduce public spending by £2 billion. It simply doesn't add up. It's what we're getting from reform. It's what we used to get from the Conservatives. We'll probably still get it from the Conservatives, but it's just not good enough in delivering balanced budgets for the people of Scotland.
Fulton McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In recent days, many members of the Tartan Army have reported suddenly having their electronic system for travel authorisations, or ESTAs, revoked by the United States Government, forcing them to jump through new hoops or even travel for emergency appointments at the US Embassy in London. With thousands of Scots due to leave for the US to attend the World Cup in the coming weeks, including many in Coatbridge and Christen, what is the First Minister doing to ensure that Scots are not unfairly blocked from entering the United States?
First Minister.
I appreciate how frustrating the situation is for any Scotland supporter who's had their ESTA revoked. While information about individual cases has not been shared with the Scottish Government, I understand that the decision to award an ESTA may change if further information emerges about an application which was not available at the time of the original decision. Unfortunately, in such cases, detailed explanations are not always provided to applicants. I am aware that the United States Embassy has issued advice to individuals affected by ESTA refusals, indicating that they may apply for a visa through the FIFA Pass system, and I have asked officials to convey our hope that they can resolve this so that Scotland's fans do not miss out. I have asked for specific representations and engagement to be taken forward with the Consul-General of the United States in Scotland, and that has been undertaken, and we will do all that we can to help out to resolve these issues.
Alan Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister is well aware that hospitality businesses are not having their troubles to seek at the moment, with rising input costs on all fronts. But the UK already charges far higher VAT than most other European countries. A lot of leading organisations have launched a campaign calling for a cut in VAT to 10%. That's the problem. Would the First Minister join me in backing that campaign and calling on the UK Chancellor to cut VAT for these vital hospitality businesses?
First Minister.
Well, it's interesting from all the moaning and groaning going on around about here. Nobody seems to want to help the hospitality sector as much as Mr Smith wants to help the hospitality sector. Well, we're all shouting and bawling. They've all come to life at the last minute, presiding officer. How reassuring! It's glad to see there's life left in the old dogs around about here. What I would simply say to Mr Smith is that Mr Sawar is shouting and muttering at me. I'll simply use one term to deal with Mr Sawar. Employers' national insurance contributions have been a disaster. And for all the years that Bolling Stephen Kerr's party were in office, they never cut VAT in hospitality. So don't come here with unreasonable expectations from the Conservative Party.
I have to say how pleased I am that Alan Smith was able to ask that question and liven the chamber up, actually. So that was good. That was a nice ending to the afternoon's First Minister's questions, which are now concluded. The next item of business is a statement by Gillian Martin on greenhouse gas emissions statistics 2024. I'm just going to allow a minute or two for members to change over, and then the Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, to which there should be no interruptions or interventions.